Well, I want to begin again by just commending you for being here, to come here to be exposed to these biblical principles that I just think that shows incredible wisdom on your part. And I really mean that, because becoming one with another person is an incredibly complex process. In fact, I was reading something the other day in a book, and it said that becoming one is the gut-wrenching process of learning to give up my rights. And that is very, very true. I mean, if it were simple, then the world wouldn't be experiencing the relationship disasters that it does. It's really harder to get a driver's license than it is to get a marriage license. And most people enter marriage with little or no training, no real instruction. And it seems like if we brought that kind of skill level to our jobs, we would all be out of a job. Maybe that's one of the reasons why so many marriages seem to end so poorly. Learning to become a skillful lover is both an art and a science. And it begins with making right choices. Now, in the big blue box in your manual, there's kind of the big idea for this session, and it is making right choices before marriage promotes oneness in marriage. Learning to make right choices before marriage promotes oneness in marriage. And then look down at these first few points of introduction. Marriage is a decision that will change the rest of your life. Now, that ought to be obvious. I would say that marriage is the second biggest decision that you'll make. The first big decision is you have to decide who's going to be the master of your life. The second is who will be your mate for life. And the third is, what is your mission in life? What are you here for? And the order of those three, I think, is critical because it determines how you go about making decisions. And these are the decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life. Now, obviously, you're pursuing marriage because you feel like life is going to be better if you are bonded to the person that you're in love with. Everybody goes into marriage expecting that marriage is going to make them happier. But as you know, it doesn't always work out that way. And marriage has the potential to make you feel more pain and more isolated than you ever felt if you don't get started with the right foundation. I remember I went through premarital counseling, or when I went through premarital counseling, the pastor told me, and I thought this was really strange, but I was good friends with this pastor and was in the church for a long time, but the pastor told me that one of his goals for our time together would be that he was going to try to talk me out of getting married. And that sounded strange to me, but since I myself have become a pastor and I've seen so many broken marriages and so much hurt that have come to people, I've kind of adapted his basic approach. What we're trying to do for you in this session is to raise some questions that you need to be thinking about, issues that can cause marriages to go bad. And it just seems like sometimes we never get around to really talking about those kinds of issues before marriage. And so we're going to raise some questions and we're going to raise some issues. And if it causes you to have some doubts or concerns, or if it causes you to go a little bit slower in your relationship until those issues are resolved, then we feel like that we have done you a service. In fact, the way that preacher put it to me, he said, I want to build a fence at the top of the mountain to redirect you if this is where you're not supposed to go. I'd rather do that than run an ambulance service at the bottom of the cliff. And so what I'm saying here is, even if you're engaged and even if you've set a date, if you begin to wonder at some point, I'm not sure that I'm ready for this, I'm not sure that this is the right thing, I would encourage you to slow down and resolve some of these issues. And so that's what we're talking about here. So marriage is a decision that will affect the rest of your life, and engagement is a time to do several things. Not just prepare for the wedding, but for your marriage. And those are the things we're going to focus on this session. Engagement is a time to begin to develop skills that you need for a successful marriage. And that's what this entire conference is about. and we'll explore that in greater detail in the next couple of points. But it's also a time to continue to evaluate your compatibility as a couple. What we would encourage you to do, especially as things come up through the weekend, is don't gloss over things. Don't gloss over issues and concerns that surface, especially during in your engagement. If you're going to really experience a mutually satisfying marriage, then you got to be real. You've got to be honest with what you're thinking and with what you're feeling. And if you don't do that, it's dishonest, and you're just saving up, and it's all going to come out sooner or later. And when it does come out, then your partner, your spouse, is going to feel like they've been deceived. And they're going to look at you and go, "You mean you've been thinking this? You've been feeling this way for all this time, and you never told me?" So it's so important to continue to evaluate your compatibility as a couple, and then to prepare for intimacy and commitment. Engagement is a time to prepare for intimacy and commitment. Commitment is the C word, isn't it? I mean, what does it mean to commit yourself to someone? And I think the best place to go for an answer is to look at the traditional wedding vows. Usually there's a single question to which you have to answer, "I do" or "I will," and then there is a specific vow that you make to your bride or your groom, and you repeat those words after the pastor or the minister. And who's going to get married? Who's somebody's going to get married like in the next 3 months?
4.
4? Okay. All right. Drew and Alexis. All right. Well, we'll just kind of have a little run through here. But this is kind of like if I was marrying you, I'd be looking at you and I'd say, "Drew, do you take Alexis to be your wife? Do you solemnly promise to love her and honor her and cherish her and forsake all others and perform to her all the duties of a husband for all the days of your life?" I mean, and don't say yes, because see, I'm a real pastor, and if you say yes, then the whole thing's over, and we just, but I'm going to be, I'm going to ask you a question like that, and then usually in the traditional wedding vows, there are some repeat after me kind of vows where, I would look at Alexis and I would say, "Alexis, repeat after me," and she'd say, "I, Alexis, take you, Drew, to be my husband, and I promise before God, before these witnesses, to be faithful, loving wife, in sickness and health, and riches and poor, and joy and sorrow, as long as we both shall live." And that you would make these vows. Now, I mean, those are really radical vows. And I don't know that we really think about it, but I mean, by making these vows, you're committing to loving your mate until one of you dies, honoring your mate until one of you dies, cherishing your mate until one of you dies, not to be involved with any other person of the opposite sex until one of you dies, to perform all the duties of a spouse until one of you dies, to be loving and faithful through every circumstance for as long as you both shall live. I mean, is that radical or what? I mean, that is some kind of promise. And what I'm saying to you in this hour is that you not get married, that you absolutely refuse to even consider it until you're ready to genuinely make that kind of vow, that kind of promise. And it's a lifelong commitment. And it doesn't have a whiff of conditionality about it. I mean, you're committing yourself for a lifetime to that person no matter how they respond. In other words, you will continue to work on your part even if they do not work on their part. Now, our culture doesn't say that. The world's pattern is entirely different. In fact, if the culture rewrote the vows, it'd be something like this: "I, Hiram, take you, Jane, to be my wife. I promise to love you whenever possible. When you're worthy of it, I'll honor you. When I want something from you and you give it to me, I'll cherish you. If everything goes well between us, the relationship will continue. But from my point of view, it'll mostly depend on you. And I wish you nothing but the best." I mean, that's kind of that's the way we act. It's almost as if that's the vow. That's the cultural vow. And it's no wonder with people thinking like that. No wonder 6 out of every 10 marriages break up, and another 2% say that they're miserable. You cannot build a lifelong intimacy and trust without that kind of vow and commitment being made, the kind that Drew and Alexis are going to take. So not the cultural vow. But anyway, let's look at some of these things. Evaluating your compatibility on page 69. Letter A says an engaged couple must continue to evaluate whether they are right for one another. The point here is that engagement is not marriage. You are not married yet. Sometimes I think engaged folks feel like they need to love their fiancé in the same way, with the same kind of unconditional love as they'll have after, or that they must have after marriage, but that's not the case. There's one example of a woman that I know who fell into this to the point of giving money and even opening a joint checking account with her fiancé, and this guy was definitely not financially responsible. And when she pressed her concern about how he was handling the money, he and his spending habits, he began to manipulate her by questioning what type of wife was she going to be if she couldn't share with him everything during the engagement. Well, no, engagement is not marriage. Engagement is a time where you're looking, it's kind of like you're going to buy a car and you're looking at that sporty little Miata, and you've test driven that thing and you're pretty sure that you're going to do this, and you've talked to the salesman, you worked out the price, you've made an application for a loan, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, do I really want 48 months of payments? And so that but you haven't bought the car yet. And engagement is kind of like the loan application process. You're almost there, but you're not there. It's a time to continue to think, is this what I really want to do? And so what I'm saying is, you are not married yet, so don't act married. Continue to evaluate your relationship and be serious about this, even if it means putting your wedding off or breaking your engagement. Because a broken engagement is bad. It's difficult, but it's not as bad as a broken marriage. Number one says a couple must continue to ask a series of practical questions, like how much are we really alike? I think engaged couples a lot of times talk romantically about how opposites attract, and they certainly do, but it's real interesting. Neil Clark Warren has written a book entitled Finding the Love of Your Life, and he says research findings are highly consistent that most stable marriages are those involving two people with many similarities. Over the years, I've become deeply convinced of this. For couples, similarities are like money in the bank, and differences are like debts they owe. If you want to make your marriage work with someone who is very, very different from you, you'd better have a large number of similarities as permanent equity in your account. If you don't, your relationship could be bankrupt at a frighteningly early stage. Especially when it comes to your values and beliefs. You need to be together on values and beliefs. We're not talking necessarily about taste in music and all of those kinds of things. However, the more of those kinds of things that you find that you enjoy together, he says that's like money in the bank. Letter B says, do we agree on a basic plan for our future? And this weekend we're laying out a biblical blueprint for marriage. And when this weekend is complete, you should have some good conversation with one another. Take the weekend apart. What did you agree with? What did you find difficult? What do you think that needs to be applied right away? What should you wait a little? What's going to take some time for you to work through? You got to process this and think about it in terms of your future, because you need to be thinking about having a plan. How is this new life? How is our new life? How will we do it? How will we make it work? What's the plan? And are we willing to follow God's plan? Letter C says, do we agree that divorce is not an option? Now I know this runs counterculture, but a lot of what we're talking about this weekend is countercultural. It is not the way God intended it. So the problem here is, if you go into marriage with an escape hatch mentality, then you're almost doomed from the start, because it's just a matter of time until enough, quote, bad things happen that kind of the withdrawals from the love bank get so low, and you begin to think, I'm not sure I really like this, and then either you get involved in some kind of extramarital affair, it takes you down, you get more and more isolated, and if you've come into marriage with this escape hatch, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just bail and start again, you won't have the persistence to go get help and work on this thing. And the authors of a book entitled The Compatibility Quotient list 14 compatibility factors that they say can influence a stable marriage. Number 3 on their list is the degree to which partners accept divorce as an option. Here's what they say. There's a simple rule of thumb that we've learned to follow in our counseling. If one or both partners in a relationship assume that divorce is a ready option, then when things go wrong, the outlook for that relationship is relatively dim. So what we're saying is when you take these vows, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, for sickness and health, if the poorer comes or the sickness comes, you're, like Robertson McQuilkin, going to be a person of your word, and you will do whatever it takes to continue to make the marriage work, because divorce is just not an option. Letter D, do either of us have unaddressed personal problems that could cause difficulty in our future marriages? If you've come from an abusive home, if an alcoholic family, if you have unresolved issues with your father or your mother or a former spouse, and you continue to emotionally wrestle with those and maybe even kind of project them onto this person that you're considering marriage, I just want to encourage you to try to resolve those kinds of things before marriage. Marriage will not help you get beyond those things. What you need to get with is a Christian counselor or a pastor who can help you work through those things so that you get rid of the baggage coming in. A young woman at one of these conferences told me how her father had left her when she was very young, and she was deeply hurt, and she was constantly suspicious of her fiance, and she just found it was extremely difficult to trust him. And what her fiance needed to understand was that her issue went much deeper than him. She was struggling with the question, not just can I trust him, but can I trust any man? And she needed to explore that issue and work it out before she got married. One of my fellow speakers, Jim Keller, encourages couples who are remarrying to ask themselves the hard question, what went wrong in that first marriage, and what part did I play in what went wrong? What role did I play in it? And he reminds remarrieds that they didn't divorce a bad person to marry a perfect person. They need to consider if they're bringing any unaddressed issues with them into the second marriage. You see, building a great marriage requires two emotionally healthy people, and the time to get healthy is before you get married. Letter E, do we agree on attitudes towards making and spending money? How do we talk and fight and make decisions together? Very, very important. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but there are different ways of expressing emotions. Some people vent and blow up, and some people hold it in. But you right now, during engagement, when you have disagreements and you argue, and you need to process not just the issue, not just whatever it was you were arguing about, but how did you argue? Did you fight fair? Number 2, a couple must also be willing to ask some hard questions about their relationship. For example, how much of our decision to get married has been affected by feelings? And obviously, you're going to feel something for one another. You're not going to get married if you don't feel something. But feelings will not sustain a relationship, because what happens when feelings change? Well, I feel like I want somebody else. So feelings are good, but they can't be the basis of it. Same with outside pressures. Is this marriage that you're thinking about, are you being pressured by parents or friends or finances, or the fear that this may be your last chance, or the fear of being disgraced if we break our engagement? Sometimes a person knows that there's just things that don't add up about the relationship. Some kind of unhealthy issue that's not being addressed. But they kind of ignore it, numb themselves, and just make believe everything will take care of itself somehow. Listen, there's something worse than being unmarried, and it's being married to the wrong person. Letter B says the engaged couple must also evaluate their spiritual compatibility. Are we committed to something greater than our marriage? And this gets at those two other questions I mentioned. Who will be the master of my life? Who will be the master of our lives? Where do we take who do we take our lead from? And I'm talking about spiritually speaking. And then what will be your mission in life? And see, if both of you are committed to Jesus Christ as the master of your life, then that is the starting point. In our home, I don't have the final say. Karen doesn't have the final say. When we're evaluating a move or a major purchase or significant issues, we talk together and we pray together and we ask for God to give us leadership and those kinds of things. And He's the one that invented marriage, and He's the one that has the resources to make it work. And so what I'm saying is both of you need to be committed to Christ and committed to what He wants for your lives together, His mission for your life. That's why the question 2 says, do we have the same essential spiritual beliefs? Look at the verse on the top of page 70. It says, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from His love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one spirit, one purpose. The passage is saying that you need to be headed in the same spiritual direction. And the Bible makes it clear in another place in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, that believers should marry believers. If both of you are pursuing your relationship with God, then the closer you get to God, the closer you become to one another. And you see, the way marriage works is that God longs to love us and encourage us and lead us, and He wants to be involved in our lives. And the key individual in your life that He wants to use as a funnel for His love is principally your spouse. And God works principally through those who are His children. And it's like your spouse becomes a conduit of God's love and power and tenderness. And if that person doesn't know Christ, or they don't have any spiritual interests, and they're not like-minded in seeking to know God, then that channel, that way that you would experience God's love, that channel is going to be blocked. You won't experience His kindness and His compassion and His loving character and even His correction. That's being cut off because God is saying to each one of you, He's saying, I love you, and I want you to be careful to pick a person through whom I can love you. Pick a person who will be a channel of my love. So I don't think God is being hard-nosed when He says that, that we're supposed to marry a Christian or somebody with like-minded and spiritual beliefs, because it's a part of His love and protection for us. In fact, every command in the Scripture has been given for one of two reasons, if not both, and that is to protect us and to provide for us. To protect us from the things that would cause us pain, and to provide us with things we could not achieve on our own. So do we have similar levels of interest in spiritual things? That doesn't mean that he has to be the next Billy Graham or she's just like Mother Teresa. The question is, do you both have a heart that's warm toward God? And some of you might be thinking, well, I know she's not exactly where I'd like him to be spiritually, but I'm going to change him. Well, I warn you, marriage is an institution, but it's not a reformatory. And not only does it not work, but as I said before, it's dishonest because you're going in to this relationship and you've got a hidden agenda. You're just going to wait till get the ring on the finger, and then you're going to get out the hammer and chisel and the sandpaper and go to work to make this person over into the person you want him to be. And that usually causes great resentment, and it's dishonest. So you need to be on the same wavelength spiritually. Letter C, an engaged couple should consider outside guidance. The Bible is a source of wisdom and direction. And the Bible teaches us by example and precept, but we see stories of people in the Bible, some who live according to God's design, and even though life may not always be all smiles and sunshine, they experience a fullness of life because they walk with God and they have that relationship with Him. And we see examples of people in the Bible who reject God and say, nope, I think I'll do it my way. And we see the results of their lives. So it's interesting, the more skillful we become in reading our Bible, and the more focused the lamp becomes. You notice the verse there, it says that the Bible is a lamp unto my feet. So the more we read and the more we study and become acquainted with what God has to say in His Word, the clearer things become. Prayer is a source of guidance and confidence. Proverbs says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. And in all your ways certainly includes marriage. In all our ways we're to acknowledge Him, and that simply means that we are to agree with what He has to say about life and relationships and marriage. We're to rely on Him. It doesn't say that He makes the path smooth. He says He makes it straight. In other words, confidently clear. And just would ask you the question, have you really seriously prayed, God, is this what you want? Have you just assumed, well, yeah, God brought this person in my life, but have you just said, God, is this what you want? Do you want us to is this the person you want me to live with for the rest of my life? I would encourage, just ask God. Even pray together. God, this is where we think that you're heading us. But we just want to make sure we have your blessing and ask Him for that. I know that I went through a process. Karen and I dated off and on for about 4.5 years, and it was always my fault for breaking up. I mean, we'd date for a while, and then I would see another person, and I was a jerk. I mean, I was immature, I was a jerk, but I was always come back to her, and so I had come back, and she had told me, she said, after the 4th time, she said, if you come back, you better bring a ring. And so my friend and I, Tom Mayo, we went jogging every morning at Florida State, and we would go by this little Methodist chapel, and we'd go in there and pray, and I was praying, God, is this what you want from me? I mean, do you really want me to marry Karen? And so I was out at the mall, and I walked by, and I saw this ring, and I knew it was exactly the kind of ring that she would like. So I go in and buy the ring. I figure I can always take it back if God says no. So I buy the ring, and I said, Tom, I bought the ring, and so I'm praying, and I'm just wondering, is this the right thing to do? And I'm seeking God. I'd be reading the Bible, and this was kind of confusing to me, but I kept reading through Proverbs, and I would read passages that would say, there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And I go, now wait a minute. Now does that apply to this other prayer that I'm praying, or am I just, So I just couldn't get a peace about it. So I told Tom I was going to take the ring back. And he was trying to talk me out of it, and I said, no, I'm taking the ring back. So he and I get in the car, and we're riding down these back streets heading towards the Tallahassee Mall, and I'm taking the ring back, and I look, and coming straight at me is this little Datsun B210, this blue car, and it's Karen and her friend. And so at the same time, we pull off the road, and she rolls down the window and looks at me, and she says, what are you two doing skipping class? Well, I couldn't tell her I was taking her ring back. And so we talked for a few minutes, and then Tom grabbed me by the arm, and he said, you are not taking this ring back. We are going to go back, and we're going to pray some more. Well, anyway, I went through all this process of praying, had this buddy of mine praying with me, and I'll tell you, now, obviously I did ask Karen to marry me, and she said yes. But going through that process, when things have been rough, I can honestly tell you, we've argued and we've fought and we've had struggles like every other married couple, but I never have wondered, Did I do the right thing? Did I miss it? Because I spent weeks just saying, God, is this what you want? I was willing to give it up if it wasn't what he wanted. And he confirmed that to me, and so I've never had to doubt. So anyway, number 3, the advice of wise counselors can give you an objective perspective on your relationship. Talking to parents and friends and a pastor or counselor. This is one of the most significant insights that we mention in our time together. Have you sought the counsel of objective people, people who can just say, here's what I see. And I had friends, several friends that I talked with, several pastors that I knew that I talked with, and talked with my father a lot about it. And my father said, if you don't marry her, I'm going to figure out some way I can, even though he really loved my mother. But not everybody told me the same thing, but I got a lot of good insight into myself and things that I needed to know up front. And so counsel is very, very important. Then number 4, a couple may need help in confirming their decision to marry. And if you'll notice, just leave your finger there, but turn over to page 129, you'll notice there are 5 practical steps for affirming your commitment to marriage. This would be something that you would do post-conference if some of these issues come up, or something, you just feel like you need a little more time to think these things through. This is kind of a practical way to affirm your commitment to marriage. So you can look over that later, but I just wanted, you might dog-ear that page or write it in your notes right here, that you might want to work through that. Also, I would highly recommend any kind of premarital counseling you can go to. It would be great. The fact that you're here this weekend, that's great. There's also a book that's been put out by Family Life entitled Preparing for Marriage. And this book basically takes the main topics like why marriage, when 1 + 1 = 1, and then evaluating your relationship. It's a really good little book. It's a workbook kind of thing, and that you go through, and then you just sit down and talk about what you wrote. Because the whole idea is to reduce the number of surprises that come later on. So the more you can talk about now up front, the more you're not surprised later on. Now, page 71. The Bible instructs a couple to save sexual involvement until marriage for a variety of practical reasons. Now again, I know I'm going cross-culture here. I'm going counterculture. Because it's a proven fact that I was reading a study the other day done at Indiana University, and 79% of the guys and 71% of the women were sexually active. And another study I ran across compared the sexual activity of Christian singles with those of non-Christians, and there was no difference. Both groups were sexually active to the same extent. But the Bible is very clear about leaving sexual intimacy for marriage. The Hebrews 13:4 says the marriage is to be held in honor among all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled. In other words, you save it. It's something special for the commitment of marriage. 1 Thessalonians 4:3 just says it straight out. It says, "For this is the will of God, that you abstain from sexual immorality." It can't be any more plain than that. The point is, if you want God's blessing on your marriage, you've got to follow what God says He will bless before marriage. And so if He said, sexual intimacy is something that I have taken great joy and great pains to be able to give you, and we'll talk about that in the intimacy session. It is a gift from God, but He says this gift is something that is for marriage. It's for this commitment, and it's great to have a fire and to be warmed by the fire, but the fire needs to be in the fireplace, not out on the Oriental rug in the front. And so the point is, you can't really know if it's God's will for you to marry if you are just apathetic or out and out rebelling against what He has said a pure relationship is to be before marriage. Look at point 1. The ability to demonstrate sexual self-control now lays a foundation for future trust and intimacy. Circle the word trust and intimacy. One woman that attended our conference said, before marriage, my fiance said to me, I just can't wait any longer to be with you. And she felt flattered, to be desired, and they became sexually involved. What she said to Karen was she was having a hard time trusting her husband because he travels quite a bit. And she said, sometimes when he's away, I wonder, was he really saying, I can't wait any longer to be with you, or was he just saying, I can't wait? And what happens if he can't wait any longer to be with me and I'm not there? See how trust is affected? Letter A, sexual self-control is necessary throughout married life. So like Michael said, it's not just, let's see how many times we can get it in today. I mean, you have to exercise sexual self-control throughout marriage. Couples who are sexually active before marriage may have a higher incidence of affairs after marriage. Couples who live together before marriage may have a higher incidence of divorce. And I'm not going to go through all this, but this is not out of the Bible. I mean, I've got articles and studies, all kinds of things. This is from Time magazine. It says last year in the U.S., more than 4 million unmarried heterosexual couples shacked up, in contrast to only 500,000 at the end of the supposed free-spirited 60s. It says, though living together has become conventional, the report cites studies showing that these unions, in comparison to marriage, tend to have more episodes of domestic violence to women and physical and sexual abuse of children. It notes that annual rates of depression among unmarried couples are more than 3 times those of married couples. Most surprising, perhaps, for many Gen Xers who think living together is a prudent rehearsal for I do, the report contends that cohabitation reduces the likelihood of later wedded bliss. It quotes a 1992 study of 3,300 adults showing that those who had lived with a partner were 46% more likely to divorce than those who had not. The longer you cohabit, the more tolerant you are of divorce, says David Popenoe, the sociologist who co-wrote the study. You're used to living in a low-commitment relationship, and it's hard to shift out of that kind of mental pattern. Now, I mean, I've got tons of stuff. I'm not going to go into it. I think we make the point. Like, God knows what He's talking about. He knows what He's talking about when He lays down some of these ground rules. Number 2 says sex during engagement can cloud more significant issues. It can create a false sense of compatibility. The emotional power of a sexual relationship can keep a couple from thinking clearly and objectively. Why? Because the physical just overtakes everything else. You think, well, yeah, look, the plumbing works, so everything else is going to be okay. But as long as the plumbing is working, you're not talking. And because you have this physical relationship in a low commitment environment, you're afraid to bring things up. And so what we're saying very simply is, no matter where you're at in this, some of you may be living together now. You know what? I've had people come up after every conference and they'll say, we heard what you said and kind of made me mad at first. But the more we talked about it, the more we thought, we're going to do it God's way. And in the very last conference I did, there was a couple that wrote me after, and they said, we left the conference, we went, and both of us went back and to living with our parents, and we told God we wanted to start our marriage off right. And so we confessed that we had done wrong, that we shouldn't have lived together, but we're going to start marriage clean and pure, and they did that. Look over something that'll help with this on page 73. We have something called the Purity Covenant. The Purity Covenant. And I'm not going to go through this, but this is what I would encourage you as for your project, to really think this through. If this is a struggle for you, or maybe it hasn't been a problem, but just we're going to make this commitment. But I would encourage you, if you want God's blessing on your marriage, then follow what God has to say before marriage. It's just that simple. And that's where letter B on the bottom page 71, an engaged couple may need to discuss how to wait until marriage to have sex, and that's where we recommend reading through and signing and making a commitment to the purity covenant. Letter C, every engaged couple should invest in their future security by agreeing together to keep the purity covenant, which I've just talked about. Now, summary, page 72. What we're saying is very simple. Engagement is not marriage. Engagement is a time to continue to evaluate your relationship. So keep talking. Don't hold things in. Get it out. Engagement is a time to make sure you're ready for marriage and to lay a good foundation for the future. Any kind of premarital counseling, books like Preparing for Your Marriage, any kind of resources that will surface questions and issues that you can talk about will be very helpful. And then letter C, just the caution. It's easier to break off an engagement than a marriage. I know this probably comes across real strange. It was strange to me. I mean, you go to a family life marriage conference and somebody tries to talk you out of getting married. Well, not exactly trying to do that. But if I can build a fence at the top of the cliff and at least cause you to slow down and evaluate, then I think I've done you a service. Let me close. Father, thank you for each one of these couples that are here. Lord, they're here because obviously they're interested in getting their marriages started off on the right foot. And I pray that this weekend would be a time to raise issues and surface questions that would lead to talking maybe in a way that's more deep than has taken place to this point in time. And I pray that you would help these couples work through the friction as it arises, and God, just pour out your blessings on them. Give them your Spirit. Give them the want to, the desire to follow you in all the things that you lay before us, principles that will ensure that we're starting our marriages with your blessing. And we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
That was Family Life Weekend to Remember conference speaker Charlie Boyd speaking on preparation for marriage. On the next CD, we'll hear from Carl Clausen on God's power for oneness.